I am Dr. Raul Fernandez. I use he, him, his pronouns. I serve as the Associate Dean for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at BU's Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. I'm also a faculty member in our Educational Leadership and Policy Studies Department. I teach a course almost every semester called Diversity and Justice in Education, where we talk a lot about the role of our own identities and experiences in our work as educators. And that's something I hope we can talk a bit about today. I'm pleased to welcome you all to our panel called Meeting the Moment, Teaching During Periods of Social Change. As the description for the panel says, social change is always happening, albeit slowly and sometimes erratically. But there are moments like this where activism and awakening collide. Where resistance to progress suddenly gives way and there appears to be, at least, an opening to make meaningful social change. During this time of disruption, as racist statues come down and racist systems are confronted, how can we as educators make the most of this moment? How can we use it as a teaching tool without exploiting those most impacted by the injustices we seek to interrogate? How can we challenge our students to not just seek understanding, but solutions? And how can we do it all while struggling with the challenges of the pandemic? Well, we've assembled a phenomenal panel to help us work through all of these questions. And here they are. I'll introduce them and they'll have an opportunity in a moment to reintroduce themselves. We have Dan Adler, a Wheelock alum and 6th grade science teacher at Up Academy in Lawrence. He's also a recipient of the Millikan Educator Award. We have Dr. Christina Dobbs, an assistant professor in English education at BU Wheelock. Her research interests include academic language development, the argumentative writing of students, and professional development for secondary content teachers. She's actually a former high school teacher as well as a literacy coach, easy for me to say, and reading specialist. Dunia Dunner, a Wheelock alum with a background in special education and a 4th grade teacher at Michael J. Perkins School in Boston. They're a past recipient of BU Wheelock's Dean's Academic Excellence Award. Dr. Davina Jackson, an assistant professor in English education. Her research interests include critical literacy, culturally responsive teaching theories, equity, anti-Blackness in English education, and Black language. And finally, Gavin Smith, an educator and advocate for social justice who currently serves as the associate head of school at Fenway High School and is the co-founder of YMOC, Young Men of Color. I'm excited to learn from and co-create knowledge with you all. And so here's how this is going to go for everyone out there. In a moment, I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, and really to ask you to reflect on what else we need to know about you, your positionality. That's the sort of the compilation of the identities and experiences in which help you shape your worldview, and of course the experiences that bring you to your work as educators and as leaders. From there, I'll start with a few questions before inviting the audience to ask their own. For audience members, you can indicate that you'd like to ask a question by clicking on the participants icon and using the hand raise feature at the bottom of the participants list. That'll help me track who's up next and to make sure that we can get everyone's questions in the short hour we have together. What I'll do is I'll actually promote you to panelists. You have an opportunity to engage directly with the panel yourself. You can also use the chat to make observations and even ask questions, although please know that may be difficult for me to follow while moderating the conversation. If I do miss a question, I ask that maybe one of the panelists can point it out to me. Of course, for all of us, it's important to listen to one another and to be relatively brief in our own remarks so that we can hear as many diverse viewpoints and experiences as possible. So let me go ahead and end my opening remarks there and allow our panelists to introduce themselves. Again, please tell us whatever you think we need to know about you, your positionality, and the experiences you bring to your work as educators and leaders. Dan, let's go ahead and start with you.
Thanks, Raul. So just to reintroduce myself, my name is Dan Adler. I am a 6th grade science teacher at Up Academy Leonard in Lawrence. My pronouns are he, him, his. Just to continue with that positionality introduction, I identify as a cisgender white man, and I think to transition into some of what Raul was talking about when he talked about the awakening that we're feeling in this moment, and the fact that this is very much a moment in education and in our country. I think for me, I want to name 2 things. One, it very much feels that way for me, that this is a moment where I have to change my pedagogy to meet the moment. And I also want to name my privilege in that, which is, as someone who checks off most privilege boxes, I can think of so many other events that could have prompted me to the kind of reflection and change that I am trying to effect in my pedagogy right now and with my students. And I think that's just been something I'm reflecting on. So I'm glad and proud to be doing that reflecting and that change now, while also just being aware of how much I don't know and how late I am to the game. So just in terms of other things you should know about me, I teach in Lawrence. I love teaching in Lawrence. I teach primarily Latinx students, about 99%, mostly from the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. I love the community in which I teach. And I think right now, a big part of my job is to learn as much as I can about the lived experience of others and about how systemic racism has affected our education system and our country and our families and their experiences, so that I can make sure I'm not just teaching, the standards of sixth grade science, but also what our students need to achieve long-term success in a system that is really often stacked against them.
Great intro. Thank you so much, Dan. Christina, Dr. Dobbs.
Christina's fine. Hi, this is Christina, which is what I prefer to be called. I use she, her, and hers. I sort of come to this work from a long background. When I was a high school teacher, one of the things that really shaped my perspective was seeing one of my students who I was quite close with get caught up in the juvenile justice system, and didn't have a lot of tools to to sort of do anything about that. It was quite painful, and I've sort of been interested in a set of those questions ever since. I was an English teacher, and in some ways still am. I taught English today. And there are a lot of issues about equity sort of embedded in English, what texts we think are worth reading, whose language we think is acceptable for school, and all the students who are left out of that equation. There are so many pieces of that that I spend a lot of time thinking about. I also spend a lot of time studying teachers' beliefs and how we shift those. So I spend a lot of time with white teachers. White teachers are primarily white women in the United States, and I spend a lot of time thinking about how to have conversations with them about these issues, how to work through some really complex learning about things like privilege, and how spaces are uniquely oriented to suit their needs, but not the needs of others. So I spend a lot of time thinking about that. I identify as multi-ethnic and also as Latinx, and I often find myself in rooms where I'm the one of the only women of color, if not the only one, although that never happens on Team English Education now, which I enjoy. And so that's just a little bit about me, and I'm excited to see some names I recognize in this chat. I wish I could see your faces, but I'm so glad to know that you're virtually here.
All right, thank you. Let's go with Dunya.
Hi, I'm Dunya, they, them pronouns. I work for Boston Public Schools at Michael J. Perkins, and I'm a 4th grade teacher. I hold numerous intersectional identities that have shaped how I came to be a teacher. I'm Arab and Latinx. I am a queer person, genderqueer, and I am a teacher. And I think that when it comes to, sorry, I lost my train of thought. When it comes to how my identities play a role in my teaching, it's everything. It's the experiences I had as a child when my skin tone was very different and I was much darker. And the experiences that I had in a classroom with the teachers that I had in a primarily white district that completely changed my worldview, because it's life-altering to come into a classroom and have a person who's supposed to hold your identity safe for you, but instead disregard them. And that was when I experienced that, I started to realize that I wanted to become a person for students that they could come to with their identities and know that they're safe and that they have a place where they can exist and learn and grow no matter who they are. I think something that needs to be mentioned is, like I said, when I was younger, I had a very different complexion. So I got the brunt of a lot of heavy racism. But when I got older, I developed an autoimmune disorder that changed how my skin tone looks. And now I hold a great deal of privilege because despite having intersectional identities, I am white passing. I present as a person who doesn't necessarily hold ethnic diversity or racial diversity. So I'm coming to terms with how my identity has sort of changed and how that looks with students. And I think that this is an ongoing conversation, and I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Phenomenal. Thanks, Junie. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Thank you. Davina, Dr. Jackson, how you doing?
Good. How's everyone doing? And I'm happy to be here as well. So I come to this work after having taught for 24 years in the Detroit metro area. So I haven't lived in the Boston area, of course, that long. So having taught high school and both middle school, so as a Black woman, having two Black boys, I know what it's like to have experienced anti-Black racism. And so when I think about today, when I think about, you know, why I'm here in terms of like what I can offer today, in light of the implications of COVID-19 and the role that racial unrest, police brutality, anti-Black racism and white supremacy and deficit ideologies play in our classrooms, schools, and beyond, you know, I'm really thinking about how we as educators must love and care for the communities in which we teach. My research specifically addresses how educators can support and affirm Black students' full humanity. And when I think about their full humanity, I'm thinking about their identities, their languages, and their cultures.
Thank you so very much. And finally, Gavin Smith, how you doing?
Hello, everyone. It is lovely to be here today. My name is Gavin Smith. I am the Associate Head of School at Fenway High School in Boston Public Schools. I think a lot of my experience has been shaped by my identity, the many different parts of my identity. I am from a plantation town in Jamaica known as Appleton. If you're familiar with Appleton rum, very, very close to that, where the descendants of my family, about 3 generations back, were slaves. This and the historical context of all of that has led my family down a path where we view education as the ultimate tool, the great equalizer. And through my path to education, or through systems of education in New York public schools, I have attained a level of privilege and also a seat at the table that I don't take too lightly. So for me, the work that I do, that we do in my current role, is to empower students so that they can sit in these same spaces and share their voices and change the game, change what the system looks like, because we know the more individuals, more diversity that exists within these systems, the more likely there is to be that change that we wish to see in the world. So thank you for having me, and looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Gavin. So, you know, I want to start. There is an assumption embedded in the very title of this panel. It's called Meeting the Moment, right? Meeting this moment. And I'm wondering what you make of this moment we're in right now, and if you even think it is a moment. Is there something uniquely different about where we are right now? You know, it seems to me that there was, you know, we did have activism and awakening that have collided. You know, I mean, I'm curious to see what you think about it, and whether or not you feel like this moment is still here. Is it slipping away? Have we made the most of it, if it's been here at all? And so I know that I just asked about 7 different questions, but I wanted to provide some space for you to attack it potentially from different angles. You know, whoever wants to jump in, just kind of wave your hand or something like that, and we'll bring you right in. You can also feel free to unmute and go for it.
I'll go.
Please.
I think we're seeing a cycle. And within every cycle, there are moments that shine through, whether for positive or negative reasons. But this is a cycle that is brutal. And I think that with every time a tragedy happens, such as the murder of Breonna Taylor. We see a spike in activism. And then as settlements are given, or as people get busy with their lives, we tend to move on very quickly, even if we're not having moved on emotionally for people of color. The way that society approaches it, they move on, we move on. And I think that we can make this a moment. I think that we are in the shadow of numerous tragedies that have just occurred. And I think that if we find a way to permanently seize this moment that we can create or that we can uphold, then real change can occur. But until we find a way to get a permanent grasp of it, I don't know how we're going to be able to doctor change. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, it's all about your perspective. It's really important. Thank you. Others? Dan, I see you unmuting.
I just want to second what Dunya said about the cyclical nature of this. And I just think it's up to us how much of a moment we make this. I want to repeat what I said in my introduction. This feels like a moment for me, but that also feels like a consequence of my privilege, where I could have had a moment when Eric Garner was killed. I could have had a moment when Tamir Rice was killed. And instead, like after a lot of reflection, I think the sad truth of it is those were moments for a moment. Those were moments where I think I can only speak for me, where I said, that sucks. And then 3 weeks later, I don't think I was making any fundamental changes. I think it is fundamentally terrible that what we saw this spring between George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, like it, at some point it can overload the system. And I think to Dunya's point, we had, like, the cycle peaked on us in a way that was really hard to ignore. And now people have a choice. You can make fundamental changes, and as educators, we can make fundamental changes to how we act within our schools, we interact with our communities, we treat our students, or we can ignore this moment. And I really hope we're not living that same cycle that Dunya is talking about, because if so, I don't know what's going to make change happen. And I can say for me and my colleagues in Lawrence, I'm seeing a lot of people take that charge now to say, okay, what has to be different? How do our schools need to be different? How are our interactions with the community going to be different? How are our curricula going to be different? And we put some structures in place to keep bringing up those conversations. And I think that's what it's going to look like to break the cycles Dunya was talking about, where it requires that constant reflection, investigation, and discomfort, and grappling with things that we haven't looked at before.
Thanks, Dan. Let's get Christina and then Davina.
Just connected to what Dan was saying, I guess, I don't know if it's like a moment in the broad sense. I sort of know it doesn't totally feel like a moment for me, because I feel like I have been thinking about doing this work for a long time. And I think that, but I can see a lot of people for whom it is a moment, and I'm interested in how we think about building on that momentum. You know, that data came out recently that white support for Black Lives Matter has fallen since June. And I think that's a bit of the cycle that Dunya was speaking of. And so I think the question for me is always, when it does feel like a moment to individuals, how do we take that in and build on that momentum in a broader sort of way, and make sure that we don't sort of keep doing this up and down cycle where we have interest in it for a while and then we think about other things, and then it takes something quite painful to bring our attention back.
Davina, what do you think about that?
Yeah, just in thinking about what Christina is saying, I think that, you know, if I were to juxtapose, say, you know, COVID-19 and the racial unrest and police brutality, I mean, of course, like, I see COVID-19 as like a significant moment, because in my lifetime, and of course yours, I mean, we haven't experienced anything like COVID-19. However, you know, when I think about like the racial unrest and the police brutality, I mean, that's direct related to the structural racism that has always been going on. So for me as a Black woman, I think about schooling itself. When I think about the anti-Black racism, I mean, that has been going on since time I started school and continues to go on. So when I think about moments, as Christina said, I think it's relative to one's positioning, right? And so when I think about Dumas and Ross's, how they describe the Black condition in relation to trauma, suffering, pain, and the disdain of and violence toward Black people, so thus in taking up their conceptualization in my own work to affirm Blackness in literacy education, I mean, I have to acknowledge how anti-Blackness continues to be used as a weapon in literacy classrooms that pervasively cause mental and physical pain to our Black and brown students. So I think that, in having to seize the moment in terms of what's going on in terms of the racial unrest and all of that, I think we have to do that. But I also think we have to interrogate for ourselves and recognize and name that what people are having unrest towards is what we've been feeling for like decades, for a very long time. And so, we have to work together. And I know we're going to talk about this more and more, but I think that as educators, we have to engage in what Yolanda Seeley-Ruiz talks about in the archaeology of the self, engage in that ontological positioning of like, what am I doing, right? When I think about like how my kids are engaging in harm, the kids that I say that I love and I respect, like, what am I doing in my classrooms now? And how am I preparing them beyond the classroom, right? What are my commitments towards their humanity, right? How am I engaging in those practices that are pedagogically and curricularly humanizing so that they feel loved and cared for? And so, so when I think about like, when we say like the moment, that should always be going on, right? And so, yeah.
I'm feeling you. I want to get right back to that. I'm going to give Gavin an opportunity to weigh in here if you like.
All right. No, I will say that this moment has been all my life. For me, the earliest recollection I have of this is Rodney King in 1991, and I was 4 years old. Following that up, as a New Yorker, LA was burning, right? In much the same way that much of the United States had burned in the past, over the past few months. Following that up, I saw Amadou Diallo, right? Not the same level of engagement in my mind. Then Eric Garner. I talk to the young men that I work with, and they tell me that, folks like Tamir Rice were, when they were fourth graders or they were in 10th grade, young man who is in a freshman at NYU, reminded me of that, right? So this also has been a part of their life and every moment that they've lived. Seeing Black bodies depicted in the ways that we continue to see them is traumatic, is an incredible experience for you to deal with as a human being. And even more so when society normalizes it.
Yeah.
The implications are not the same for others as they are for me. And my positionality allows me to recognize that, for the boys, for the young women, for, everyone that we serve, the individuals that we serve in the community, and how they are depicted, how they are viewed. Teachers walking or individuals walking to the other side of the street when they see my young men in the community, right? Threats to society, and being able to communicate and engage in conversations with not just the youth, right? The duality that many Black and brown individuals have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But now, right, the shifts that we're talking about is the appearance that white America is listening, right? Gen Z said, we have had enough. We're gonna burn this. We're gonna start over. Are you coming with us? And for a while, there was a ton of fanfare, right? There was a ton of, what do we call it? Sort of I don't want to call it pageantry, but right, the performative alliance or allegiance. And now as the dust has settled, right, the question now becomes, are you still here? Educators, what are we doing to, as Dan alluded to, learn? What are we doing to learn? What are we doing to reflect on our practices, on our positionality, on our experiences, our lived experiences? Are we saying that we're reading Dr. Bettina Love? Shout out to her. Are we saying that we're reading Goldie Muhammad, right? Or are we doing the work, right? Are we actually taking that and implementing it? Is this a trend? Have you also read Fanon? Have you read Noguera? Have you read Langston Billings? Have you read Teresa Perry, right? So many more people that are essential. You know, what is your culture in this? What is our culture? We talk about, and I say this all the time, but we talk about culturally and linguistically sustaining practices to people who don't know the culture, right? How do we have educational programming when there aren't courses on the culture? How do you come to an urban setting not understanding the Boston busing, not understanding Brown versus Board of Ed and the implications, not understanding a culture of achievement in the works of Teresa Perry, right? How do you come to education in that space and not doing that work? What we create is generations that also do not understand that, right? And Black and brown students who have to go seek that and find that themselves because the educational spaces that we create do not have that affirming value for them. So no, I don't think this is something new or awakening.
Thank you, Kevin. It seems to me one of the central societal questions that we have to reckon with, because what I'm hearing from you all is whether or not this is a moment really depends on your positionality, depends on where you find yourself in the world, right? And but understanding that for some people this is a moment of awakening, and of course as a group of people in this environment that want to get from where we are right now to some much better place as quickly as possible, because as Gavin points out, stakes is high, right? And for some of us, much higher than others. Getting there to that place we want to be is there's a greater sense of urgency for some of us than for others, certainly, and the stakes are very different. The central question I'm talking about is how do we make change that isn't, and specifically talking about addressing racial inequity, racial injustice, racism. How do we make change that isn't reliant on the murder of Black people? Because it seems like that these moments come in the aftermath of the death, of the murder of Black people. How do we do that? And more to the point, even for us as educators, thinking about what that looks like in our classrooms. And so I'm wondering if you could reflect on, there was a sort of one of those questions as part of the breakdown for this session, which is, how we can use moments like this as a teaching tool without exploiting those most impacted by the injustices we seek to interrogate. So I'm wondering if you could reflect on what that maybe has looked like for you this semester. For those of you that are like, look, I've been doing this for quite some time. So it's not just this semester in this moment that we're teaching about this, but how do you reckon with that? For those of you, I know, Christina, you talked about teaching predominantly white students and what that looks like. Dan, you talked about as a white person teaching predominantly Latinx students and what that looks like in moments like these. Adunia, please.
Sorry, I don't mean to start us off twice in a row. Um, I was born in 1997. I'm fairly young. I'm a first-year teacher, and I'm Iraqi. When I was in the second grade, 9/11 came around, and my white teacher, sorry, we were going to have a school moment of silence. And my white teacher pulled me aside and said, I don't feel comfortable with you participating in this moment of silence. I was in the second grade. She said, you need to go stand out in the hall while we do this. And it was devastating isn't the right word, because I was in the second grade and I didn't really understand. So I said, okay, Miss X, of course, I'll go in the hallway if you want me to. And when I came back in the classroom, she was saying how families of from a different country, or people from families of a different country, committed a great tragedy. And she was trying to explain 9/11 to second graders. And she points at me and she says, like Dunya's family. So I take this very seriously. As a first-year teacher, especially because I'm still gaining my footing, I'm going to mess up and say the wrong thing. I'm going to make mistakes in this process, because teaching this is hard. It's really hard work. And it's probably some of the most important work we're going to do. And the situation I just described was extreme. And I hope that that's not something that is the norm for anybody else. But in terms of teaching this work without exploiting our students, we need to take the burden off of our Black and brown students that we put on them. It is so often that Black and brown students are the ones that are expected to teach their classmates, to speak up, to be the spokesperson for other Black and brown students, to speak for every Black person in the country, to speak for every brown person in the country. It's so often that white teachers will ask Black and brown students to speak for everyone else that looks like them, or talks like them, I say it with air quotes, or acts like them, I say again with air quotes. It's not their job, it's our job. It's our job to find the literature. It's our job to find the research. It's our job to present the materials in a way that doesn't exploit, that doesn't hurt or traumatize our students. It does not help to bring tragedy into the classroom unless you are doing it in an extremely empathetic way. You cannot be scientific about tragedy. Yes, we have data. Yes, we have numbers to back the number of Black and brown bodies that have fallen. But unless you're teaching with empathy, then you're just going to mess it up, and you're going to seriously hurt some kids. And I know I'm coming off very strong, but this is something that's very important to me. So I yield.
Clearly, thank you for sharing that story. I appreciate you doing that, and I appreciate that somehow you still found yourself in this profession, even after having that experience. So we're grateful and better off for it. Thank you, Christina.
So you asked me, so I said I'm often in spaces with quite a number of white teachers. There's plenty of rooms I'm in where the person of color in the room, the only one, is me. And I guess, it doesn't feel sort of harmless to sit in rooms even when I'm the teacher and have people discover for sometimes the first time that I'm a human person with the same rights who deserves the same rights as other people. There is some pain in sort of sitting in my seat, but I chose to sit in my seat and my students didn't. So I have to always think about that. I will say, you know, I am often with large groups of white teachers having these conversations. And one thing we know about your beliefs is that your beliefs don't automatically all line up with each other. So you could change your perspective about one element of these sorts of issues and still hold some contradictory beliefs about other elements that will keep coming up. Like your beliefs don't just immediately sort of sort themselves out. And another thing we know is that for some teachers, they have to change what they believe in order to change what they do around these issues. But for some teachers, they have to change what they do in order to truly change what they believe. And so, you know, I really believe deeply that teachers need good tools. They need books to read and curriculum to look at that's well designed and all of those things in order to sort of do that work from both sides. And it is slow. Principals ask me all the time, can we do professional learning that's going to help our teachers do this? Can we have one day where we learn about these questions? And I always say, no, you can't have one day. The world would be a really different place if you could learn about these things in one day. Professional learning that really works is slow, it's deep, it's collaborative, and it takes time. So if you want to spend that time, if you really care about these things like you're asking me, you have to be willing to spend that time with a lot of people who are in different positions along this sort of pathway. And so I find myself having this, like, can we do this fast conversation a lot, and having to say to people, actually, I think the answer is, I feel the sense of urgency and I'm glad you feel it. But if we want to make a change that lasts, we have to really be willing to invest. And until you are, you're going to have this same cycle that we have where it's a hot button issue today and it's going to disappear.
I love that. And, you know, I'm mindful also, you know, of a point Dooney made earlier is, you know, this, you know, we want our students to do this work in the classroom, but we also want them, as Gavin was saying earlier, like, to go out and find these resources on your own too. If, you know, I'm mindful that, you know, I've learned a ton from very young people involved in, let's say, the Sunrise Movement and addressing issues related to climate change. And if young people are capable of doing that kind of deep knowledge seeking around issues related to the climate, certainly they are about issues related to racism, right? And that we've got to maybe be challenging students a little bit more. By the way, I've got folks with PhDs, you know, that somehow found their way through a dissertation, but need me to give them a sort of a starting place to understand why maybe all lives matter isn't the right way to approach the world. Davina, I'm gonna stop talking. You get in here before I get in trouble.
Oh, that's okay. I just looked in the chat and I just saw that Bill did ask the question. He was asking, like he said, I mentioned love for students' communities are paramount for progressive social education. Like, could I elaborate in terms of like what that looked like? So I was going to say that my current research that I'm working on is taking up this idea that I'm forefronting called justice-oriented solidarity. And so the 3 key tenets that guide that are having a shared commitment to create a Black space where Blackness takes precedence over anti-Blackness, fostering a reciprocal relationship based on a collaboration to sustain and affirm Black students' identities, histories, cultures, and languages. And thirdly, a shared responsibility to make pedagogical and curricular choices that sustain and affirm Black students' humanity. So largely, you know, in thinking about those, you know, 3 tenets, more specifically in building on culturally responsive research like Paris and Aline, Latz and Billings, you know, like what does that really look like in the classroom? Well, for me, what it looks like, some of the things out of my research is that providing opportunities for students to name, interrogate, and dismantle anti-Black racism, white supremacy, whiteness, anti-Blackness, right? Honoring students' identities, cultures, languages, thinking about intersectionality, sexuality, gender, right, et cetera. Some of my research takes up Black girls' literacies, right? Being patient with students, right? Having a positioning that is asset-based and not deficit-oriented, right? You know, a lot of times, you know, when we look at our curriculums, we oftentimes focus on representing Black and brown students in ways that are harmful, right? Why aren't we celebrating Blackness? Why aren't we putting voices in the classroom and works in the classroom where students can say that, like, wow, you know, I see me, and this is what my community is doing, right? In very positive ways, right? Sharing that power, right? In terms of, you know, when we think about a classroom as in terms of like a circle, right? You know, building off of Freire and not being where students are considered as like vessels, right? This banking model, right? We want to disrupt that, where students' ideas are valued and centered as well. Being enthusiastic, right? Building on students' interests. Of course, building that solidarity. You know, what do teacher and student relationships look like? What do teacher to teacher students relationships look like? I mean, one of the things out of my research that I saw was that in one of the teachers that I work with, here's a teacher that was building on the humanity of all of her students. And oftentimes the students would say, wow, I'm getting that love and care in this class, but when I go down the hall, right, I got a teacher who's correcting my language, you know, telling me like, you're not using white mainstream English. Why are you talking like that, right? And so that's very problematic. So how can we build this solidarity, this pervasive front where all of the teachers are doing the same things so that when students come to each class, they feel loved and cared for, building off of those asset-based pedagogies, right? Also, being forgiving of yourselves and of your students, right? We are teaching in a time where it's difficult, right? And so knowing that we all are becoming, right? We're growing and we're learning. And how about we're growing and learning together, right? Thinking about Muhammad's work, fostering a learning environment where students' genius can be cultivated, right? Are you having students interact in a multiplicity of ways, right? Are they doing blogs? Are they creating digital stories, right? Not just pen and pencil type work, right? What kind of work are they doing? I mean, because look, even if they're in a breakout room, students can still create beautiful projects, right? They can still be creating digital stories, right? So thinking more deeply about what types of opportunities are you providing for your students? And of course, to build on what Gavin already said, you know, what kind of work are we engaging in terms of self-work? Are we reading Ibram Kendi's Stamp from the Beginning? Like you said, Bettina Love's Teaching and the Pursuit of Educational Freedom. I'm sorry, but yeah, that's right. I'm sorry, I need to switch that. Goldie Muhammad's, no, that's right, Bettina Love's Teaching and the Pursuit of Educational Freedom. Goldie Muhammad's How Do We Cultivate Genius? An Equity Framework for Culturally and Historically Responsive Literacy. April Baker Bell's Linguistic Justice, Black Language Literacy and Identity and Pedagogy. Because if I hear about another teacher correcting a student's grammar where they're standing up to talk, that's problematic. And it's still going on in 2020. And to build on what you already said, Dunya, I experienced that too when a teacher said, when a college professor corrected my grammar and said, what are you doing here? How did I get this far? It's still happening. And so we have to be able to disrupt that. So those are just some of the kinds of things that I'm talking about when we talk about building solidarity and how we might love and care for our students.
Davina just dropped the mic. Wow.
All right, Gavin, go for it.
Oh, wow. You know, when you were speaking, Davina, it also reminded me of Black History Month and Black history. You know, I love to think about Kiesi Layman, Black abundance or Black excellence, as we talk about, right? Like, and what that means. Black joy. Black communities are always celebrating those things, right? Black girl magic, and wondering where that exists within the culture of school. You know, I view that Black History Month in many ways as Black first. Right, the first person to do this, the first person to do that. That's not it, right? Like we are more than a series of firsts. We can talk about Ghana, Mali, Songhai, ancient Kush, right? We literally built pyramids, right? Architectural geniuses. How often is that celebrated, cultivated? Talk about, you know, the ultimate Black history, the American Black history that exists, the the great founders of the world? Are we teaching about the Black Panther Party? Are we teaching about, you know, just Black excellence in general, not as a one-off, not in a month, not as one piece of your curriculum, but throughout your curriculum? You ask, how do we move this work? And I say a large part of it is advocacy, right? Advocate for students, for families, getting them to the table in really meaningful ways. If your population is, you know, over 60% Latinx, as mine is, then family engagement is more than transcribing paper, right? And saying that we provided documentation in Spanish or Haitian Creole, right? It is, how are you empowering these families with these lived experiences and these valuable experiences to come to the table and share those experiences? And beyond sharing those experiences, when they share those experiences, how do we then shift our practices to meet the needs that they are identifying? Because although I have that same lived experience, this was 20 years ago, right? So that experience, there are things that I need to learn. There are things that white educators need to learn. There are things that Black and brown educators need to learn as well. The anti-racism work is for everybody.
That's
So
right.
I think about, how are we helping our students and families grapple with hidden curriculum, especially when we know that over 80% of the teacher force is white, right? They are the experts on that, right? How are we also teaching students to deal with duality? You know, I think the policing of Black and brown bodies in schools is clear, is evident. School to prison pipeline talked about so much. Cultivating a culture that is beyond that doesn't just involve removing some of those practices in theory, right? Getting rid of them on paper, but what are you doing to teach our students about sort of the implications of these things? How are you helping to prepare them for what is next, right? I think that has to be really central to this, a culture of achievement. Black and brown students can do everything. I've said this, there has never been a time in my entire teaching profession, my teaching career, and my lived experience where a Black person was given an opportunity, a brown person was given an opportunity, and they did not rise to the occasion and meet that. High expectations with high supports. That is culturally responsive. Deficit-based approaches and agendas have no business in urban education, in education in general. If you wouldn't do it for your student, then our students deserve more. And I think that is how you move the work. That is how you get us to where we want to be, right? We have to give students the tools to navigate these oppressive systems. And we also, quite frankly, have to change these systems. And our students, I think, are very aligned to do that. They want to do that.
Thanks, Kevin. I gotta tell you, as I hear y'all talking, I'm like tearing up a little bit. And I think it's because I was trying to think about why it is. I think it's because you're showing us like that there is another way, and that it feels so liberating. Like the way that you're talking about education feels so very different than what I experienced coming up. And if like I can see it almost, and it feels liberating. And I just want to just say thank you for that. Folks, we've got 10 minutes left. If you do have a question you'd like to ask live, put your hand up. If you wouldn't like to get promoted and ask that question live or anything, you can also put it in the chat. Thank you, Davina, for getting to Bill's good question. I wanted to ask you this, and I'll keep an eye out to see if anyone else has anything else. But I want to ask you this: for those that are like, man, this is like hitting me. Like I want to do better. I want to be a better educator. I want to be a better communicator. I want to be a better school leader. I'm thinking about maybe a good framing for this is like, what's one place you'd recommend that they start? Maybe something that they can start doing, and or something you think they should stop doing, avoid doing, like pull out of get that away from your pedagogy, like bye. Do you have anything like that you'd like to share? Yeah, Dan, go ahead.
I can think of two things. One, I just want to elevate something, and I feel like, Gavin, you said this really well. One thing to start doing is having two-way conversations in the communities in which you teach and in your work than having one-way conversations. I think this is something, and I think something I think about is when we talk to our families, are we presuming their experience or are we really learning their experience? So just to add one more author who I think has really shaped a lot of my thinking is Lisa Delbit, when you think about other people's children and like who holds power, and the idea that historically what we've had is a lot of teachers who look like me, who walk into classrooms with students who don't look like them and presume their experience, presume their deficits, to Gavin's point, and don't do a lot of thinking and a lot of communicating and relationship building to figure out, you know, what do you value? What are your dreams? Like, how can I support you and like the unique child that you are and the family that you are to get you where you're going? So I think that would be my thing to start doing is, are we communicating at parents, to Gavin's point, hey, look, I translated this, or are we actually engaging in meaningful conversation to learn, build relationships we can leverage to do good work together and break some of these structures that we've all talked about that sort of sit insidiously over the way education has worked and works today. In terms of something to stop doing, I think something that's been really influential to my thinking, in the last few months is the idea of the invisible tax. So I see someone putting in the chat a reading list. I think that's a great idea. If you just Google John B. King, invisible tax, Washington Post, you'll see a phenomenal op-ed by John King, who was President Obama's second Secretary of Ed. And what he's talking about is the idea that in general, teachers of color leave the profession faster. And a lot of it is because they are asked to take on responsibilities above and beyond what white educators are asked to take on. So for example, he cites the example of Black male educators in school settings who are asked to be the disciplinarians and the tough love givers. And as a result, teachers who look like me can say, no, you do that. That's you can do that better than me. I think about it as a community I teach in with a lot of Latinx families. How often, to be honest, in the beginning of my teaching career, I was just saying like, hey, can you translate this for me? Or, hey, can you help me with this? And asking of people's time without really thinking of all that extra burden I was putting on my colleagues. So like one thing I've tried to make a really big focus the last couple of years is finally getting off my butt and getting better at Spanish, because I don't want to keep asking people to do the work for me, to go to the first part of building relationships with my families, because they really value it when we can sit down, have a conversation. And even if I have to say like, muy despacio, por favor, we can have a conversation, and that's something I can do to authentically connect with our families without putting the onus on my colleagues to do the work for me. So that's one thing you can, I guess, start and stop doing. Stop putting the invisible tax on teachers of color. To Dunya's point, like stop asking people of color to do the learning for you. Step up and take responsibility yourself, and start having real two-way conversations with your families and your communities.
Thank you. So folks, we've got 5 minutes left. I want to make sure I hear your voices one more time and be respectful of your time if you have something after this. Who else would like to share next? Anything you think folks should start doing or stop doing?
I can go. I try to be quick. I would say do the work, right? Co-conspiratorship, not allyship. You know, Davina mentioned Yolanda Sealy Ruiz and Archaeology of Self. I think that's a great place to start. Dan talked about the retention rates of Black and brown educators, Black educators in particular. As a Black male educator navigating this space, I can say that it is truly difficult. But looking at the work of folks like Travis Bristol, and you know, to be pretty frank or curt, be selfless in your approach. If you view anti-racist work, anti-Black work as extra, do me a favor, and you probably need to leave the profession or leave urban education as we know it, because there is no space for that. There is a sense of urgency that we have, that doesn't need to be highlighted when Black and brown bodies fall. That is not where that work is, right? So I think we need to be culturally responsive. We need to read, we need to act, we need to engage in policy, we need to engage in the work, do extra. If we think we're doing extra, think about all of the different things that our students have to navigate. I'm not talking about from a pity sense that child has to work or they're going through poverty, but I'm talking about living in a black and brown world and coming into a white space every day, switching cultures, shifting, battling ideologies that do not love them in the ways that we say that we need to love our children. So I think that is some of the work that we really need to focus on. And I say that as far as schools go and college preparatory programs.
Thanks, Gavin. Anyone else want to chime in here? Davina, you're muted.
I'll just say like one quick sentence, you know, just that, you know, building on what Gavin was just saying in terms of like reading and acting. And ultimately, we have to work in solidarity, right? And so working in solidarity means working with and learning from the students who we say we love and care about. Working in solidarity means working with other teachers to help and support each other so that we can meet the needs of all of our students. Working in solidarity means working with and learning from the communities in which we teach in, right? Who knows our students better than we do, but our parents. And so we have to build on the assets, right? The cultural assets of the communities in which we work. So working with parents, learning from parents, working with and learning from our students and the communities in which we teach, so that we don't become the one person, right? Where Gavin isn't the one teacher that is engaging in that much needed work, that Dunia isn't the only one, and that Dan is not either, right? And Christina and me and many of the others who are the ones, right? How can we be others, all of us working together in solidarity to support the humanities of all of our students?
Thank you, Davina. Christina.
I'll just say really quickly in relation to what Davina said, like, I think we often see a lot of isolated pockets of people doing things that are valuable. And if you're at the beginning, the answer is read and listen. That's where you start. But if you're starting to do things and they're working, a thing to think about is how can I make this a structure and not an incident? So if I find a way, a lesson plan that really works, how can I spread that to my colleagues in a way that they might be excited about it? How can I, you know, if we have an event like this one, how can we make that a series that we continually have time to engage in that conversation instead of just a one-shot deal? And then I think more and more people can get involved. You know, if you develop a good relationship with one student sort of incidentally, how can I make that more of a structure where I ask more questions and make sure I know every student in that way? Like, turning incidents into structures, I think, is a way to make a change that is more lasting and can make you feel a little less isolated if you feel like you're doing a lot of work and starting to feel tired.
Thank you. Structure, I love that. Dunia, close us out, please.
Oh, that's a lot of pressure. I just want to say to everyone's point, really, that this is work that we have to do together, and attempting to do it alone is not going to get you very far. And that is because the only way to do this work is to learn from those around you. And to learn, that's the only way you're going to learn about yourself. That's the only way you're going to be able to learn about your students. Actually, no, that's a lie. The only way you're going to be able to learn about your students is to listen to them. That's what I wanted to say too, is I talked about empathy earlier. The first step in doing this work is listening. Stop talking for just a minute. And I say this as a person who talks oh so much. Stop talking and listen. Listen to the voices that are trying to speak and who are speaking, but that are constantly being trampled down. And most of the time, those voices that are constantly being trampled down are the students sitting in your desks that you say you love so much. And you're not necessarily doing it on purpose. You're not being malicious. When we don't hear a student or we don't see a student's hand, we're not doing that on purpose. But if you start to become educated and you start to learn, and then you continue to let the students' voices be trampled down, you continue to not see the hand in the air, you continue to not listen to your students, then that's when it really becomes an issue. So just listen and you'll learn. And then eventually you can start talking and help teaching others as well.
Thank you so much. I was just circling some words in my notes here, which love, empathy, solidarity, humanizing, and so many other great words that were shared today. So thank you all. I will say, just to close us out, I just appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time to share with us what it is that you do, and for giving me a whole lot more hope about the future of our profession, and also of our society, because we've got people out there not just teaching, but teaching others how to teach as well. So really appreciate y'all. Two things for the attendees. One, once you close out of this, you're actually going to get your browser will open with a survey. Encourage you to take that survey. Christina, were you going to stick around and talk to any folks that were interested in grad programs? Is that something that's about to happen?
There were a few people who signaled when they registered that they wanted more information at grad programs. I'm going to stick around if anybody has any questions, or you can feel free to put something in the chat or email me. Also cool if you're ready to go. But I'd love to meet anyone who is interested at some point.
Yeah. And for everybody, this session was recorded, so I know people are like, hey, like furiously writing down these authors and books and everything. We'll make sure we get this posted as soon as we can, so on the website, so that you can actually go back, and I know I'm going to go back and write down some of these things. So just thank you everybody for attending, and thank you all to our panelists for gracing us with your time. Appreciate you all.